Are you the kind of person everyone can turn to when they need a helping hand? Your neighbor needs someone to water her plants for 2 weeks, and you say yes. Your coworker wants you to stay late to help him or her finish a project that's not your responsibility, and you say yes. And the PTA committee is asking you to bake your fabulous brownies for the bake sale. You say yes. If the truth is you'd rather say no a lot of the time, but the word yes comes out of your mouth instead, perhaps you need some help. Here with some insight into why we say yes, as well as tips on developing our no skills, is Diane White with the Gemini Counseling Center. Welcome, Diane.
Thank you, Meredith. It's great to be here.
Well, it's good to have you here, because I'm wondering, why is it that people have such a hard time saying no?
It's a very good question. You know, I think our desire to be helpful is very much part of our humanness, you know, so we use that as a way to connect with people. And that's a very lovely part of human nature. But where it goes wrong is when it seems that we are unable to stop saying yes. Oftentimes that's because we want other people to like us, and we believe that if we say yes, other people will think that we're really easygoing and really helpful.
Like you even more.
Yeah, and that they'll be our friends and we'll be accepted and we won't be rejected, all the things that really dominate adult relationships that we're afraid of.
But sometimes people take that too far, constantly saying yes.
Yes, they do.
What kind of situations can they find themselves in when they find themselves always saying yes?
Well, initially, you know, there's this belief that if I say yes, that you're going to be grateful. So that's one of the things that we're trying to get out of that sort of exchange. But that doesn't typically happen. The more we say yes, the more people become convinced that we don't mind or we actually enjoy doing what we're doing for them. There's usually then less gratitude, and sometimes we even feel more taken advantage of. And this is when the whole thing starts to shift and we become resentful of that person, and we start really getting angry at them. And so we actually sabotage the very relationship that we're trying to establish by saying yes all the time and then getting this resentment and then being angry, and the other person is smiling and has no idea we don't want to bake those brownies or help with that project.
Right, because you've done it a dozen times before and you're always so happy and you're so quick to say, sure I will, that why won't you do them this time around?
Exactly.
All of a sudden things have changed and that person's confused.
Of course they are, because the belief is Meredith loves to bake her famous brownies, you know, and meanwhile you're up at 1 o'clock in the morning baking them, you know.
Going, I can't believe I'm doing this.
Exactly.
And you fall into those situations.
Right.
So then, what might be our solution? How can we start saying no?
The first thing, I think, is to recognize what are the motivations, you know, what keeps us in the position where we are saying yes, where we don't want to. Starting to get in touch with some of the feelings and what we're actually trying to do. In some regard, it's actually manipulative because we're trying to get other people to like us. Maybe some beliefs about ourselves that we're unlikable just the way we are, that we have to do something extra or offer something extra for other people to accept of us.
You mean kind of like a situation where someone feels they need to prove themselves?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, or do something, you know, if we're just going to be friends at work, you're not going to like me enough unless I do you a lot of favors or help you out all the time, you know. And again, this creates that same sort of thing where resentment can build. So getting in touch with our motivations and starting to really look at, I wonder why I do that, you know. A lot of times we feel compelled, like we have no choice. If I'm asked, I must say yes. And we always have a choice.
Always do.
Yes, we do.
So we need to recognize that people are not going to like us or love us more simply because we're a yes person, a yes man, like they used to say.
Right. That's absolutely
So
right.
what's our first step in starting to say no?
Becoming aware, really evaluating the situation, and you know, when someone makes a request of you, you need to really say to yourself, is this an appropriate request, for one thing, based on the nature of the relationship? Do I have the time to do this? Do I actually want to do this? So we start looking at separating those things into when do I truly want to say yes and when do I not really want to say yes. Then we have to deal with the fear of what's going to come up if we say no.
And how do we face that fear? I mean, if it's been motivating us to say yes, then it's got to be conquered. How can we do it?
Well, it's not so easy to necessarily conquer the fear. We have to figure out, again, what are we afraid of? You know,
where's it coming from?
Right, and what is the worst thing that could happen if I say no? So
What is the worst thing that could happen?
I think a lot of people think that they will be completely rejected by the other person if they say no. And so one of the ways that we start to work with this is that you look at situations where the stakes are not so high, relationships where it's not like you wouldn't start out doing this necessarily with your sister or your best friend. You might just do this with someone who's less important to you. Because if that really happened, it would be less painful and less upsetting. I think that's more of a fear than a reality, though.
So simply start small where the risk isn't so high.
Exactly.
With a relationship. Right, with a relationship that where the risk, an example might be...
A simple example that I often talk with clients about is, you know, if you're out to dinner and you order something and they bring it and it's the wrong thing or it's not exactly the way that you wanted it. Many people will actually sit there and the waitress will come over and say, "How is your meal?" And you say, "It's lovely." And then to your dinner companion you say, "I can't believe
this is horrible. I can't believe
they put it on the wrong bread or they overcooked it or whatever it is." These are examples where we start to form our boundaries, where we can start saying just in community, really, you know, I didn't get the right thing, you know, or I didn't get what I asked for, or, you know, this is not what I want. We start asserting ourselves a little bit more and saying this is not okay with me.
Interesting. So what are some other tips in terms of what people can actually do when they're trying to learn to say no?
A lot of it is really just doing it, just saying no.
Just start doing it.
Just start doing it. Practice saying no in places where, like I said, where the risk isn't that high. And then really observing what it is that happens. You know, typically, like in my restaurant example, we get a very positive response. You know, people are apologetic and, you know, they're willing to deal with the fact that we say no and that we're setting boundaries with them.
And I'm sure to consider the question when it's given to you. When someone asks you to do something, to kind of step back and really think about it and say, you know, is this something that I want to do or isn't this something I want to do?